The backyard lights hung low over the fence, swaying in the Oklahoma wind, the kind that carried every laugh farther than it deserved. Mom stood on the deck, glass raised high, her voice crisp against the country music. "Some kids make you proud every single day," she said, eyes fixed on Derek. "Others you just wish you didn't have to see at all." Laughter rose like applause, sharp and practiced, and even the string lights seemed to flicker with agreement. Derek grinned, soaking it in, while Dad flipped burgers beside the grill. Pretending smoke explained his silence. I kept my glass at shoulder height. The lemonade warm now, the ice long melted. "Good news." "Mom," I said, still smiling, "your wish just came true. I'm already gone." The chatter stalled, caught between disbelief and discomfort. And for the first time that night, I heard the wind again. Mom's expression didn't break, but the color drained slow as the twilight behind her. "Don't be dramatic, Evelyn," she said, tilting her glass just enough to seem in control. "You always turn family gatherings into your little performances." I met her stare and answered softly, "Maybe it's just hard to compete with your favorite act." Derek coughed into his beer, pretending it was funny. But no one followed his lead. I set my glass on the patio table, the condensation leaving a pale ring, and turned toward the back door. The music tried to fill the silence but tripped over itself. Too cheerful for the moment. "Behind me," Mom called. "You'll regret walking away from your family." I didn't stop or look back. "I already did once," I said, stepping inside. The air cooler, quieter, truer. That was the last family party I ever attended. At 15. I learned silence was easier than arguing with Linda Carter. She spent Saturdays bleaching Derek's baseball pants, bragging to neighbors that he was destined for a scholarship, while I soldered wires from a junk radio on the back porch. When she passed by, she said, "You'll ruin your eyes staring at that trash." And I answered, "Better my eyes than my time." She frowned like the words offended her sense of order, muttering that no boy would ever marry a girl who smelled like burnt circuits. Dad stayed neutral, sitting behind his newspaper as if headlines could shield him. When I asked if I could take a summer coding class at the community center, he said without looking up, "Ask your mother," she replied. "We don't waste money on hobbies." And that was the end of it. I saved lunch money anyway. Coins stacked in a jar under my bed. One more quiet rebellion she'd never notice. Aunt Susan was the only one who knocked before entering my room. She brought a paper bag from her bakery, the smell of cinnamon chasing away the detergent air of the house. "Don't tell Linda," she whispered, slipping an envelope into my notebook. "This isn't charity. It's an investment." Inside was a $100 bill, folded once like a secret. I said I couldn't take it, and she smiled. "You already did." I bought a used keyboard from a pawn shop and spent nights copying code from library printouts, the screen flickering but alive. One evening, Linda found me there, the glow lighting the outline of her disapproval. "This junk won't feed you," she said, yanking the power cord. "Your brother needs the computer for his stats." I plugged it back in after she left, whispering, "Then I'll build my own." Later that year, my project won a local tech fair, a small mention in the school bulletin. Linda framed Derek's baseball clipping right over it. Perfect symmetry in her mind. Dad dropped the newspaper on the table, covering my name completely. I stared at the folded edges and said nothing, because by then I understood that in our house, silence was the only language anyone heard. The envelope from the University of Texas arrived on a Thursday afternoon, thick enough to matter. I slid it open at the kitchen counter and read the words "full scholarship" twice before breathing. "That night at dinner," I said, "I got in." Dallas wants me in their computer science program. Linda set down her fork, her voice calm but cold. Dallas. That's 4 hours away. Derek's got showcases coming up. He needs you to help with scheduling. I told her. He's got coaches for that. I have my own future. She looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Your family comes first. Evelyn, don't turn selfish now that things are going well for you. Dad cleared his throat, slicing his steak too neatly. Maybe she could start at the community college. Closer to home, he said. As if compromise ever sounded like freedom. I folded the letter, pressing the university seal flat, and replied, I'm not asking for permission. Linda's eyes narrowed. Don't forget who's paid for everything you've used under this roof. I met her star. That's the thing. You paid for a roof. Not my direction. Derek laughed through his mouthful of potatoes. Good luck surviving in a big city. Genius. Dallas will chew you up. Mom smiled at him as if he'd delivered a sermon. I stood up, saying only, I'll manage. No one stopped me. Not even Dad, whose silence had long been his signature. 2 weeks later, Aunt Susan called while I packed my duffel. Your mother doesn't know I'm calling, she said, her voice soft like the start of rain. Take this debit card. 500's loaded on it. Flight or bus? You decide. I hesitated. And she added, Dallas has wider skies. Sweetheart, you've earned a piece of it. I thanked her, tucked the card into my wallet, and hung up before she could hear the quiver in my breath. That night I printed my acceptance forms, sealed them in an envelope, and left it on the kitchen table beside Derek's trophies. When I walked out the next morning, I didn't say goodbye. Some doors open quietly, and you don't close them behind you. Dallas didn't greet me with fanfare. It gave me heat, noise, and rent that ate half my scholarship. I waited tables at a diner off Elm Street, apron stiff with coffee stains, while juggling a data entry job at night for a medical supplier. Noah Pierce, Aunt Susan's son, studied data engineering at the same campus, and he found me half asleep over my laptop one afternoon. You can't keep coding on no sleep, he said, sliding a paper cup toward me. It's not optional, I told him. Survival never is. We started meeting in the corner of his mother's bakery after closing, the scent of sugar and yeast hanging around like an alibi. He sketched a crude flowchart on a napkin, arrows looping back to a single word shortage. Hospitals run blind during flu season, he said. If we could predict supply gaps before they happen, they'd save lives. I stared at his handwriting and said, then we give them a map. That night became the first of many. Our laptops reflecting blue light across trays of cooling bread. The prototype took shape faster than our exhaustion could protest. Noah handled the math. I built the interface. Stubbornly clean. No clutter to hide behind. It needs a name, he said, tapping the screen where numbers pulsed like a heartbeat. MedPredict, I answered, because it sounded like a promise. We ran tests using public hospital data, and when the accuracy climbed past 80%, Noah grinned. It works, he whispered. I smiled back, careful not to sound like I believed it yet. Money was still scarce. But Aunt Susan never asked questions. As long as you're building something good. You've got a booth, she said, sliding over plates of leftovers. We printed our first poster for a campus competition. Letters uneven but visible enough to matter. When the judges asked who funded us, Noah said, we're self-supported. And I added, mostly caffeine and doubt. We didn't win. But a professor named Dr. Foster approached afterward, handing me his card. Keep going, he said. The idea's real. Walking home that night through the neon quiet, Noah asked, "You think it's worth it?" I told him. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be this tired. Dallas didn't feel foreign anymore. It felt earned. One sleepless line of code at a time. The warehouse smelled like metal and disinfectant. A graveyard for broken equipment. I worked the late shift, scanning barcodes until the fluorescent lights blurred. The supervisor barked. Double speed. "Carter, we're behind again." And I said, "You can't rush precision." He shot back. "Then you can rush home." But I kept loading crates, trying to ignore how my hands trembled from caffeine and lack of sleep. When the shelving unit groaned above me, I didn't even look up before the crash. Pain lit through my leg like electricity. The supervisor froze. His voice small now. "You need to say you tripped. Don't file it as workplace injury or corporate'll cut hours." I stared at the swelling ankle and whispered, "Then cut me entirely." He muttered something about policy and left to call someone else who wouldn't ask questions. The night nurse at urgent care pressed her palm to my shin and said, "Fracture. Not full break. You'll need a boot." I told her, "I can't miss work." And she sighed, wrapping the splint anyway. Noah showed up before dawn. His hoodie half-zipped. "You're not paying for this," he said, signing the form before I could stop him. "Workers' comp will cover it." I argued, and he laughed once. "You really think they'll do right by a part-timer?" I didn't answer because we both knew the truth. He drove me back to campus and parked by the dorm entrance. "Take the week off," he said. "Med Predict can wait." I looked at him and said, "It can't. We're too close." We coded from my bed, my leg propped on a pillow. Laptops balanced like fragile promises. "If this fails..." "We still tried," he said. "No," I told him. "If it fails, we rebuild." The fan hummed between us, steady as pulse. And I realized that survival had never been about standing. It was about refusing to stop moving, even when you couldn't walk. By spring, the cast was gone and the limp had turned into memory. Noah burst into the bakery one afternoon waving a printout. "We got the pilot," he said, breathless. "Saint." Mary's hospital signed on to test Med Predict. I stared at the logo on the page and said, "Then it's real." Aunt Susan handed us each a cup of coffee and grinned. "I told you kids, flour and code make miracles." Dr. Foster called the next day after reading the announcement online. "You've done what most labs only theorize," he said. "Keep your equity tight and your focus tighter." I laughed and told him, "We don't have investors. Just insomnia," he replied. "That's still cheaper than arrogance." When the hospital's trial results came back positive, Noah said, "We might have just saved someone's life." And I answered, "We definitely saved our own." The local paper printed a short piece titled, "Small Startup Predicts Medical Shortages Before They Happen." It ran next to a story about a high school baseball tournament. The irony not lost on me. Noah framed the clipping anyway and taped it to the office wall of our rented co-working space. "We should celebrate," he said. "Dinner's on me." I shook my head. "Save it for when we can afford dessert." He smirked. "That's the spirit delayed gratification." A week later, my phone lit up with an unknown number. Linda's voice filled the line before I could hang up. "Your brother's store is failing. He's drowning in loans. You could help." "Evelyn," I said. "You made it clear who mattered most. Stick with your investment." She snapped. "Don't be cruel. Family helps family," I replied. "Then call Dad." Her silence carried everything I remembered about Tulsa. When the line went dead, Noah asked. "Everything okay?" I said. "Everything's finally consistent. Doctor," Foster emailed the next morning, "prepare your pitch deck." Investors want in. Noah looked at me, eyes wide. Guess we're building for real now. I nodded, watching the code run clean across my screen. It was always real. They're just catching up. Dallas felt lighter that week. And for the first time, so did I. The ballroom in downtown Dallas shimmered with glass and silver. 1,000 conversations balancing on soft jazz. I stood near the podium, reading the final notes of my speech. When Dr. Foster whispered, "Full house. They believe in what you built." I smiled and said, "Good. Tonight isn't about code. It's about proof." The lights dimmed, and the host's voice carried over the crowd, introducing me as founder of the MedPredict Foundation. I stepped forward, the room steady beneath my heels, and began. "We're here to fund opportunity for students who've been told their dreams cost too much." I caught a glimpse of movement near the back, Linda's auburn hair, Mark's tired posture, Derek trailing behind. Dr. Foster had invited them, unaware of history's weight. I continued. "Every idea starts small. Sometimes in a basement. Sometimes in a house where silence is louder than applause." The crowd listened, but my eyes stayed fixed on the people who once called me ungrateful. "Tonight, we celebrate those who refuse to give up," I said, letting the applause drown the echo of old words. When I stepped off stage, Linda was already walking toward me. She stopped close enough for me to smell the same perfume from Tulsa summers. "You should have told me you were behind this," she said. "We're proud of you." "Evelyn," I answered. "You didn't come for me. You came for what I made." Mark cleared his throat. "We just wanted to see you." I looked at him and said, "You had a lifetime for that." Derek smirked, half drunk on complimentary wine. "You really turned into a star." Maybe you could help your brother out." "Business went under." "Banks are circling," I replied. "Then maybe it's time you learned what failure teaches." Linda's voice cracked. "You can't mean that. We're family," I said. "Family's not a debt I owe." She gripped my arm, nails digging. "Don't embarrass us here," she whispered. I met her eyes and said, "I stopped being your embarrassment when I stopped needing permission to exist." Her hand fell away like something suddenly heavy. Mark muttered, "Let's go." But she didn't move. "You'll regret cutting us out," she said, her voice low. I told her, "I regret staying quiet longer than I should have." When they turned to leave, Noah stepped beside me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Better than fine." The audience resumed clinking glasses, unaware of what had passed between us. Dr. Foster approached, smiling. "Powerful speech," he said. "You've built something unbreakable." I looked toward the exit where my family had vanished and replied, "That's the only thing I ever meant to build." The music swelled again, and for once, I didn't need to look back. A year later, the house by the lake smelled faintly of cedar and roasted garlic, the kind of calm no applause could buy. Noah set down a tray of glasses and asked, "You sure you want the board meeting here?" I told him. "If I built the table, I get to choose who sits at it." Aunt Susan laughed, smoothing the tablecloth. "Then make room." I brought pie. Dr. Foster raised his glass. To MedPredict. To persistence. And to finally eating something that isn't takeout. The students who'd received the first foundation grants filled the remaining seats, their faces lit by strings of warm light. One girl asked, "Ms. Carter, why name the scholarship the Carter Recode Fund?" I said. "Because everyone deserves a chance to rewrite what was written wrong." Noah leaned back, smiling. "And because you can't debug life, but you can refactor it." Susan nudged him. "Stop speaking in code. Just say it's about hope." Laughter rippled around the table, soft and unforced, like it belonged there. When dessert was gone, "Doctor," Foster turned to me. "What's next for you?" he asked. I said, "More of this, more people who show up." The lake outside caught the light. Steady and quiet. Noah poured the last of the wine and said, "You realize this all started in a bakery basement." I nodded. "Every empire starts in the wrong room." Susan wiped her hands and murmured, "Well, this one found the right door." As night settled, I stayed behind to clear the dishes, the wood grain warm beneath my palms. I looked across the table, the chairs slightly uneven from use. Each one earned. "They once told me success was leaving," I whispered, stacking the plates. Turns out it was building a place worth returning to. The windows caught our reflection, every person I chose. Choosing me back. That was family enough. Thank you for staying until the end of my story. If it found its way to you, maybe it's because you've also had to rebuild something no one believed you could. I hope you remember that peace doesn't come from where you started, but from what you create after. Subscribe, share your thoughts below, and tell me where you're listening from tonight. Your story might be the next one we build together.